Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 4th, National Pancake Day, everybody. We'll tell you about that in a second. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu. I'm not having pancakes for breakfast this morning, but I wish I was.
Missed opportunity there. I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to, and give you details, folks, on National Pancake Day. Apparently, IHOP is giving away a free short stack, so definitely look for an IHOP in your area. Because, free pancakes. How can you pass those up?
Short stack coming up. Name that movie.
Oof, I don't know. I'm going to plead ignorance on that one.
Meet the Parents. One of my favorite movies of all time.
All right. So look at you come in hot with a movie quote on this podcast. Rare.
I got to keep you on your toes, Moshe.
It's true. It's true. I should have done my research in advance of National Pancake Day.
Short coming up. I think I'm going to make pancakes for my kids this morning, now that we're mentioning it.
There you go. I mean, as eggs get more and more expensive, I don't know if we can all afford the omelet anymore, but the pancakes. It still requires eggs, though, right?
It depends which pancake mix you use. A certain Alex Saul recommends a pancake mix that does not require eggs.
I'm familiar with her.
I don't know if you've met her, but
not only have I met her, I live with her, I'm married with her, and we're parents together. I'll check it out. We'll pass it along over on the Instagram page.
Okay, to the headlines. A rough day on Wall Street to start the week as stocks tumble over President Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico, set to take effect today.
We believe with almost certainty, but things develop very quickly in Washington.
Crypto following in the stock market's path. Bitcoin tumbling 9%, reversing most of the gains from Trump's crypto reserve announcement over the weekend.
Yeah, big announcement on the crypto, and some people in the crypto industry not so happy about it. We'll explain.
To Ukraine, it doesn't look like President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky are ready to hug it out and make up anytime soon. The latest on the bad blood between the two leaders.
Plus, what the president might say about it tonight in his big address to Congress. If you're looking for details on what may come next, 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight, I'll be in Washington bringing you details.
The Pope's medical crisis worsens, the latest on his condition. What we know and still don't know about Gene Hackman's mysterious death. To education, the new courses being offered by the nation's schools with concern that AI is coming for white-collar jobs. History on the moon with the latest successful landing.
As Van Morrison once said, it's a marvelous night for a moon dance. I could have gone with many moon songs, Jill, but I went with moon dance. Can't fight the moonlight. That's usually what I do over on Leon Rhymes, the Can't Fight the Moonlight remix.
I like the classic Van Morrison.
All right, well, there you have it.
Nothing against Coyote Ugly, but I feel like you gotta go with the classics.
Classic late 90s movie.
And Moshe has on this day in history.
We will tell you on this day in history, one person said about their musical group, we're more popular than Jesus now. Can you name the band?
Okay, they appear to be official. President Trump on Monday announcing that those planned 25% tariffs for Canada and Mexico are going into effect today. Trump added that there's no room left for Mexico or for Canada to avoid or negotiate out of the tariffs. He also announced another 10% tariff on China on top of the 10% that he announced last month. The stock market, not that into it, reacting negatively to the news. The Dow fell more than 2% in the hour after the announcement. The market is now down for the year in 2025. Last week, Trump claimed on Truth Social that drugs pouring into our country from Mexico and Canada at a very high and unacceptable level were the primary reason for the policy. But it is more than just that. On Monday, the president also said that Americans are being taken advantage of by companies manufacturing outside of the U.S. The president said, quote, they can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they are being punished by tariffs. It comes after Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said Sunday that both countries have done a reasonable job securing their borders with the United States, but that fentanyl deaths in the U.S. continue to be a sticking point.
Jill, notable, you had Lutnick saying that on Sunday. Hey, they've done a reasonable job. It might be less than 25%. On Monday, Trump's like, nope, 25%.
Mexico, if you remember, agreed to send troops to the border. Canada appointed a fentanyl czar last month when Trump first proposed the tariffs, although many of these measures were technically already in the works. Economists across the political spectrum say that tariffs on Canada and Mexico will drive up prices for Americans on key imports. While importers officially pay the tariffs, they typically pass along that cost to consumers, hence concerns about inflation and higher prices. And there is a wide range of items that we get from Canada and Mexico. So that includes dairy, lumber, cars, energy, and seafood from Canada, produce, beer, tequila, and electronics from Mexico. The increases will impact construction costs, grocery bills, fuel prices, and consumer goods across the U.S. So basically everything, Moshe.
Well, yeah, and then throw in China, which is a lot of electronics, furniture. A significant amount of furniture in the U.S. comes from China, clothing, textiles, toys as well. So look for potential prices to go up there. Remember, we told you about at least the tariffs on Canada and Mexico last month. They were delayed in an 11th hour deal, and there was hope. And I guess there still potentially is hope that they get taken down sometime between this recording late on Monday night and Tuesday. That does not appear to be the case right now. That this time, Trump's like, no, we're actually going to impose the tariffs this time because I was able to get what I was able to get with the threat last time, and this time I'm actually going to impose them. Now, as far as North America is concerned, the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, the three of us in North America do about $2 trillion in trade annually. What tariffs do is charge those importers 25%, effectively a tax on all items, and they get passed along. And sometimes there's fights in between or within the supply chain. For example, there's a fight right now between auto parts manufacturers and the actual car makers. The auto parts are like, well, we're getting charged more, so Ford, GM, Stellantis, you guys got to pay more. And they're like, wait, we're also getting charged more because the way that cars get built in North America with various plants is they might move across the border multiple times between Mexico and the US and back to Mexico to finish it off, then back to the US. How many times will they be charged tariffs here? So this does have a potential major impact on autos in particular. I was talking recently to the mechanics that we go to here in New York, and they're like, yeah, we bought up as much supply of certain parts as we could, worrying about this over the course of the past few months. Now, what this means for the average American, we're going to find out, Jill. You know, we told you 90% of our avocados, among the many things we're talking about, avocados, most of them come from Mexico. And while we do have an avocado market in the U.S., in California, not enough are grown even remotely in California to handle American avocado needs. And so you could see, that among other things, the prices go up there. This does mean hundreds of billions of dollars in goods that come from Canada, lumber, minerals, oil, auto parts, maple syrup, a whole variety of things could go up. Now, notably, these tariffs will hurt the Canadian and Mexican economies way worse than they'll hurt the U.S. economy. While we do sell a whole bunch of stuff to Canada and Mexico, it makes up about 20% of our overall trade and exports, whereas for Canada and Mexico, a much more significant, more than half of their exports go to the U.S. So they're hurt much more by this. What happens with tariffs? Well, either Americans facing those tariffs, higher prices, will buy less of that product, none of that product, or seek alternatives to that product. And that's the pain that Trump is trying to bring to these countries to get them to be malleable to his will here, in particular on drugs and trade. It's interesting watching, Mexico here, because Mexico, they sent 10,000 troops to the border. They were launching more drug trafficking operations. They extradited nearly 30 cartel members, some senior members, to the U.S. in recent weeks, all in hopes of heading this off. Not enough for Trump here. He wants more done. So he's putting these tariffs there. So this leads to a potential trade war, as you'll now see Canada and Mexico launch their own tariffs on U.S. products. And we should note, more than 35 states, I think it's 38 states, their largest trading partner are here in North America. So a bunch of companies here that sell to Canada and Mexico will also potentially face their own tariffs selling their products. So that's an issue here. And then when it comes to China, China's not really been negotiating here, at least not openly like the others. So Trump is like, you know what, 10%, raise that to 20% here. And so that's what he's doing in regards to China. So you could see prices going up there. China being our third largest trading partner, it's actually gone down in recent years, especially in light of COVID, but still significant there. The big issue with China, among others, is it is the principal supplier of the precursor chemicals for fentanyl, which then go to cartels in Mexico and kill more than 70,000 Americans a year.
Meanwhile, the global fallout of the White House shouting match between President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Friday continues this week. But on Monday, Trump criticized new comments that Zelensky made about the end of the war still being, quote, very, very far away. Zelensky has said Russia needs to stop actively bombing Ukrainian civilians before he'll engage in peace talks. Russia killed several Ukrainians in missile attacks this weekend and on Monday. Trump is arguing that the comment shows Zelensky doesn't really want peace. He also called on the world to worry less about Russia. Trump met Monday with senior White House officials to plan next steps, including the possibility of halting U.S. military aid to Ukraine. He said at the press conference Monday that he doesn't think the minerals deal is dead. They were supposed to sign it Friday at the White House meeting before Trump kicked Zelensky out of the White House, with the lunch prepared and waiting in the hall.
No meal, no deal.
No soup for you, Moshe. Over in Europe, leaders from across the continent met with Zelensky on Sunday at an emergency summit to talk about a potential peace plan with Russia. They'll send it to the U.S. to talk about with Russia. They also pledged about $2 billion more to supply more arms to defend Ukraine, backed by frozen Russian assets. On Thursday, leaders will gather again for a European Union summit and will continue discussing boosting defense spending for Ukraine.
Yeah, that Russian asset thing is interesting. Basically, a whole bunch of assets held by the Russian government or Russian oligarchs has been frozen by European banks. It was seen as a point of leverage there to push peace talks. Now it looks like the European countries are basically going to spend it on Ukraine. So that's notable there as the Europeans try to make up for the fact that the U.S. right now looks like it's going to be giving less and less. The Trump administration recently stopped financing new weapon sales to Ukraine. And late Monday night, Trump paused all military aid to Ukraine. Aides say this is temporary, but they believe this will force Zelensky to the negotiating table with Russia. It's very different from what European countries are doing, which is pledging more aid. These are moves that threaten Ukraine's ability to fight at a critical time here. They're trying to hold Russian forces where they are, because eventually, if there are peace talks, Russia's going to want to hold on to as much Ukrainian territory and not give it back to Ukraine. The financing was halted in recent weeks. That comes as the Trump administration has frozen foreign aid. But this move to shut down the main pipeline for arms transfers comes after that very contentious meeting. Trump appears to be losing patience here with Zelensky. On Monday, he said, quote, "Now maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long." This is a reference to Zelensky, of course. That person will not be listened to very long. So it sounds like a warning shot here from Trump for Zelensky. Trump reinforcing again, based on U.S. talks with the Russians, that Russia wants to make a deal. And certainly the people of Ukraine want to make a deal. They've suffered more than anybody else, though, as we've told you, the Ukrainian people, for the most part, still 2/3 of them in recent polls support Zelensky. I imagine after what happened Friday at the White House, that might go up. They're rallying around Zelensky right now, feeling like he was being honest with Donald Trump and ultimately supportive so far of what took place there. Now, as for the Russians, we told you that they've been applauding, effectively celebrating what has been taking place here, this divide within the West. A Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, who typically chooses his words very carefully, he said that the U.S.'s rapidly changing foreign policy configurations largely coincides with our vision. That's a big deal there. The Russians believe that the U.S. is now in line with them. Now, what comes next? We'll be watching Trump's address before a joint session of Congress tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern time on all networks. We'll have coverage over on our Instagram page. We're set to hear from Trump, likely on Ukraine, likely on the Middle East, likely on these tariffs we just discussed, as well as everything else. Where will Elon Musk be seated? Jill, I don't know. We're going to look out for that.
What will he be wearing?
What will he be wearing? Will it be a t-shirt, or is he going to put a suit and tie on? We'll see. This, by the way, is called an address before a joint session of Congress. It's effectively a State of the Union address, but you don't have a State of the Union in years where you just became president. So it's called a joint session officially, what we know so far. They announced the theme on Monday. It's called the Renewal of the American Dream. White House officials tell us it will note 4 key areas: Trump's accomplishments so far, current economic initiatives, a call for Congress to approve additional border security, and his vision for what they say is promoting global peace. I'll be in Washington today, running around Capitol Hill, so look for exclusive content over on Instagram, including over on the premium Instagram page. If you're not a member yet, what are you waiting for? Head over to mo.news/premium to join today.
Moshe, if you're listening to this podcast every day and you're liking it and you check out the main Instagram page, it's kind of a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, folks. Modon News / no brainer. We'll have to set up that
That's
URL.
what it should be.
That's what it should actually be. It's Modon News / no brainer to join premium. Actually, no, it's still /premium, but we're going to add, the team is working on the no brainer URL right now.
Okay, time for the speed read from CNBC. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies surged for at least a little while on Monday after President Trump announced plans for a U.S. crypto strategic reserve on Sunday. But later in the day, the rally faded as traders responded to Trump's tariffs on Mexico and Canada that took effect early this morning. And his crypto plan also got criticism from within the industry. So Bitcoin was trading down 8% by the end of the day, valued at around $86,000. Ether was down about 15% at $2,100. The initial excitement was because Trump announced what he called a government crypto reserve that would see the U.S. government purchase digital assets from Bitcoin and Ethereum, as well as lesser-known cryptocurrencies, XRP, Solana, and Cardano. Earlier in the day, Bitcoin had surpassed 93,000 on Monday, up 19% from Friday. By Monday afternoon, XRP was trading up around 34%, Solana 22%, and Cardano more than 63% before those markets dipped as well in response to tariffs.
A reminder that a reserve implies here the U.S. government would buy the assets and continue buying them over time on a regular basis. A lot of questions, though, on whether Congress would be needed for this, since they allocate the money. How does the executive branch buy all this crypto without money supplied by Congress? Now, there is a bill in Congress that's separate here to call for the buying of 1 million Bitcoins. Running the numbers based on the current total, that would cost close to $100 billion based on today's numbers. Trump is trying to get the government to invest here in crypto, hoping that down the road it continues to go up and it serves as a valuable investment for the federal government. That's the bet here. Bitcoin has been doing pretty well under Trump, despite some of the fluctuations over the course of the past 48 hours here. Since the November election, Bitcoin's price has surged about 36%. On the campaign trail, the crypto industry did rally around Trump. He talked about being the most crypto-friendly president of all time. That was after the first term, where he was very much a crypto skeptic, but he's come around on this. He's launched his own meme coin. So is Melania Trump. Now, as far as his reserve is concerned, they haven't detailed yet how this would be structured, how assets would be acquired, additional cryptocurrencies, why they chose beyond Bitcoin these others. Some of those questions could be answered this Friday at a White House crypto summit. The crypto czar and chair of the summit is David Sachs. You might know him from the All In podcast. He's also a close friend of Elon Musk. He's also set to make a lot of money off his reserve. He was an early investor in Solana, one of those currencies that we mentioned earlier. He says we'll learn more from the meeting. He was fighting back with people on X who are questioning this. And Jill, what's interesting here is the people pushing back on this weren't just crypto skeptics. They were people in the industry who are concerned about, picking these winners, these specific currencies beyond Bitcoin. Why don't you just invest in Bitcoin, they say. And they're worried about the volatility here because remember, crypto goes down, crypto goes up in very significant ways, much more significant and much more wild than typical stocks. So some people are saying, why don't you invest the government's money in an ETF in the S&P 500 as opposed to going with the sort of less reliable, more fluctuating crypto. So some folks in the industry worried about this. They were also annoyed about the meme coin and the way that was released, the Trump meme coin that went up very quickly and then went down very quickly. And so some people, including Trump fans, saying, these are crypto bro schemes. Stop taxing us for these crypto schemes. Sachs pushed back on that. So we'll look for this summit on Friday to learn more here on what this reserve actually could be and whether Congress will get on board.
From The Guardian, a health update on the Pope, who suffered 2 episodes of acute respiratory failure on Monday. That's according to the Vatican. Pope Francis has now been in the hospital with pneumonia for more than 2 weeks, although he did return to stable condition over the weekend after a breathing crisis on Friday. The Vatican said he is back to using a non-invasive breathing machine after multiple procedures yesterday. They added that the 88-year-old Pope has remained aware and cooperative throughout these various health scares, although he is not yet out of danger.
Yeah, he's still on a breathing machine, but it's external. It's like a mask on his face there. As we've mentioned on the pod before, the Pope has a long history of being susceptible to lung illnesses. He had part of one of his lungs removed as a much younger man. And due to his age and condition, his recovery here likely to take a very long time. He posted on X on Sunday, or at least one of his people did, thanking well-wishers for their support after missing weekly prayer for a 3rd week in a row. There have been nightly vigils for the Pope in St. Peter's Basilica, as well as in towns and cities nearby. He had been balancing a more intense schedule this year due to the Catholic Jubilee year, as this year marks 2,025 years since the incarnation of Jesus.
From CBS News, there's still a ton of questions about the death of actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, who were found dead in their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico last week. Official results from autopsies and toxicology reports still pending as of our recording. But Hackman and Arakawa have tested negative for carbon monoxide poisoning, which is what their family had originally suspected. The local sheriff also said there were no signs of blunt force trauma when their bodies were found. Hackman was 95 years old. The actor was wearing a pacemaker, and officials say it last recorded activity on February 17th. That is 9 days before his body was found, meaning the two could have died more than a week prior. First responders said that their bodies showed signs of decomposition, bloating in the face, and mummification in their hands and their feet, which can happen naturally after an extended period of time.
So the mystery continues here. What do we know? Hackman was found in the mudroom. A search warrant says it appears he had fallen. Arakawa, meanwhile, was found in a bathroom nearby surrounded by pills. There was also a dead German Shepherd found at the scene in a closet in the bathroom in which Arakawa was found in. The dog was in a crate or a kennel of sorts. They were found by a maintenance worker who showed up at the house and got no answer and became concerned. Now, the door was not locked. It was slightly open, but it doesn't appear that anyone broke in either. Now, there was a tribute at the Oscars Sunday night. Morgan Freeman, who appeared in a couple films with Hackman, paid tribute. Take a listen.
Like everyone who's ever shared a scene with him, I learned he was a generous performer and a man whose gifts elevated everyone's work. He received 2 Oscars, but more importantly, he won the hearts of film lovers all over the world. Gene always said, "I don't think about legacy. I just hope people remember me as someone who tried to do good work." So I think I speak for us all when I say, Gene, you'll be remembered for that and for so much more. Rest in peace, my friend.
So that was part of the in memoriam on Sunday night at the Oscars, but still a mystery here in New Mexico, Jill, as we try to figure out what exactly happened.
All right, from the Wall Street Journal, some schools are reviving woodshop classes to prepare students for an AI-dominated future. Tens of millions of dollars have been invested in schools around the country to expand and revamp shop classes for high schoolers in the 21st century. The hope is to prepare students with manual skills that have been overlooked in the digital age, but will be increasingly important in a world where white-collar jobs could wane as AI advances. The classes also offer vocational skills to give students a broader view of career prospects that may or may not include college. And that comes as the cost of higher education has absolutely skyrocketed. Middleton High School near Madison, Wisconsin, just went through a $90 million campus overhaul to include new technical education facilities. About a quarter of the school students signed up for at least one class in construction, manufacturing, or woodworking at Middleton. Students across the country are showing a lot more interest in these jobs than they had in past years. However, the hurdle remains that shop classes are much more expensive to build and run than a regular math or science class, and that's because the materials cost a lot more, as does finding skilled teachers.
This is a conversation I had last year in a CNN appearance. Among the topics that came up alongside Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs was this, the importance of these, I guess what Rowe calls dirty jobs. But if you've had to renovate a home recently, hire a plumber, any of these jobs, you know that that's costing you more and more as there's just not enough people who are trained as electricians and plumbers and woodworkers. So this is significant. And it's notable because high schools started getting rid of their shop classes back in the 80s after there was a major federal report that says that schools got to raise their academic standards and get kids to be focused more on that. There was a time where, it was pretty standard operating procedure, home ec and auto repair and all those various courses. And they've moved more towards test prep type courses over the course of the past few decades. There's been a stigma to the shop programs, but ultimately it's changed over time. And there is a concern with AI and some of the technological developments that there's going to be less of those jobs and you're going to need more of these jobs, which again, there's a shortage of. Workers aged 20 to 24 in blue collar jobs has actually been up over the course of the past few years. Enrollment in vocation-focused two-year colleges jumped 14% just this past fall versus the previous fall, while enrollment up much less significantly, just 3% at public four-year colleges. I will say Jill is the son of a cabinet maker who had a woodshop for many decades in Illinois, built furniture, super important skills. And I tried to pick up some of those being raised every summer, winter, spring break in my dad's cabinet shop. My brother picked up much more than I did, but I still take pride in the fact that I can fix things around the house. Some things.
Well, the reputation, deserved or not, about Jewish men is that they are not very handy. So the fact that you're hammering in bookshelves and trying to fix things, I think you're already a step ahead.
Well, I think that might speak to the fact that my father's a Moroccan Jew, so like most of my family there from that side of the family, they all were very good with their hands. Like half of them became hairdressers and the other half became cabinet makers.
So maybe that's it. It is a gross stereotype, but it's kind of like the joke.
It is one of
the
a stereotype, but I think it's American Jewish stereotype. The Israelis have a different reputation.
And finally, from CNN, a major feat on the moon. An uncrewed spacecraft called Blue Ghost successfully landed on the moon Sunday, making Texas-based Firefly Aerospace only the first private company ever to complete such a feat without crashing or falling over. Blue Ghost is part of a privately owned fleet helping NASA in its aim to return astronauts to the moon later this decade. This is a big deal. Even countries' space programs have faltered with this. Only 5 countries' space programs have had success: Russia, the US, China, India, and Japan.
Yeah, already a half hour into landing, as one does in this day and age, selfies started to be taken by Blue Ghost. Spacecraft, they're just like us. The first one was a selfie somewhat obscured by the sun's glare, but then they sent a second shot of Earth, confirming that they're actually on the moon. Of course, those beautiful shots from the moon of Earth, the blue dot in the blackness of space. This spacecraft was launched in mid-January from Florida. It actually carries 10 experiments to the moon for NASA. They paid about $150 million for this, but this has been part of the big commercial privatization push by NASA that got started during the Obama administration. And so the hope here over the next couple of years is to ignite a lunar economy of competing private businesses while scouting around the moon for a place for astronauts to show up again in just a couple of years. All right, now time for On This Day in History. On this day in 1801, Thomas Jefferson became the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C. Some of you might know this. George Washington was inaugurated in New York. John Adams was inaugurated in Philly. Of course, they were still building D.C. at the time. March 4th, by the way, the date that all of our presidents until the 20th century, midway through the 20th century, were inaugurated because that was Inauguration Day, and they decided to move it up to January 20th due to the fact that we weren't taking horses and buggies to D.C. anymore. So they feel like the turnaround time from the election could be tightened to just over 2 months. All right, the answer to your clue. On this day in 1966, John Lennon of the Beatles is the one who was quoted as saying the Beatles are more popular than Jesus now. It did receive a whole bunch of backlash in the U.S. People offended that he was saying that he was more popular than Jesus. Beatles were more popular than Jesus. And so, famous quote on this day in history.
That was going to be my guess. I should have done. I should have went with it.
I mean, a few artists that could claim, they're more popular than Jesus. The Beatles probably being one of them. All right, on this day in 1974, the first copy, the inaugural issue of People magazine. Mia Farrow was on the cover. Of course, People continues to remain one of America's best-selling weekly magazines. And of course, they have their 24/7 website. All right, a famous divorce on this day in 1960. Lucy and Desi got divorced after a 20-year marriage. They, of course, starred on I Love Lucy. They were the owners of Desi Lou Studios. It was, at the time, one of the highest-profile divorces in American history. Speaking of TV shows, I don't know if anyone's ever made this transition before, Jill. From I Love Lucy to Pimp My Ride on this day 21 years ago.
Never.
It's a first here on the Mo News podcast. Pimp My Ride, hosted by Exhibit, premiered on this day on MTV, 2004. Still sort of peak MTV. Like YouTube was still 2 years away. We still had to watch MTV to get our music videos back then, Jill. And Pimp My Ride.
I want my MTV.
There
Was
you
that
go.
what they said? Was that what the kids said back then?
The kids who are now looking towards retirement and joining the AARP these days, Jill.
Like the kids being us.
Yeah, and older. Be that like 80s MTV, like I really, attribute that to more like the Gen Xers, the elder Gen Xers. All right, on this day in 2005, Martha Stewart's released from federal prison after serving 5 months for lying about her sale of ImClone stock. Though I have issues with this whole thing. Anyway, she flew on a jet back home where she continued home confinement. Netflix has a documentary out about her life that goes into detail on this. And turning 51 years old today, ABBA's Waterloo comes out on this day in 1974. Waterloo. I'd like to dedicate it to my wife, Alex, who's a big fan of the song and ABBA and the musical Mamma Mia.
This one goes out to...
to a special someone. To a special someone in my life. We're doing dedications now at the end of On This Day in History.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Moshe, maybe we should start doing this and send us your special requests.
You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. This one goes out to a special someone out there. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. Send in your requests for dedications today.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast.
We may have just opened a big can of worms.
We totally opened a big can of worms.